Hi beautiful people. Today I'm going to do something quite different. I'm making this video with the intention of reaching men, particularly heterosexual cisgender men. I know you've been told this lie that feminist women are anti-men, that we have it out for you, that it is you versus us. But the reality is I love you, I support you, I want you to have the best life that you can possibly have. You are not women's enemy. We actually need you to be our allies. And take that tip from one of the sexiest cisgender men that I know of.
This is not about what else women can do. You can't solve violence against women without addressing the men committing it. March was supposed to be the month for celebrating women's history, but we haven't really been able to focus on that lately because of what's going on in women's present. Just last week, a gunman in Georgia gunned down 7 women who he apparently blamed for his sex addiction.
The shooting in Georgia was absolutely a racially motivated hate crime, but in addition, Robert Long is a product of purity culture. His former youth minister, Brett Cantrell, told the Washington Post that Long was part of a high school group that met for Bible study once a week. Pizza, guns, drums, music, family, and God, said his Instagram.
The burden has been placed on us to stay safe, rather than compelling men to change their behavior.
We are the culprits here. Whether we like it or not, this is about men. And we can't even start to have that debate unless we start to reframe it with men at the center of it.
And to facilitate this conversation, I pulled a handful of clips that I'm just going to respond to on the spot. In light of the shooting in Atlanta, I wanted to share these clips from the evangelical hellscape that is the traditional teaching on male Christian sexuality.
Because when you open the door to perversion, everything is fair game.
Women, we've been victimized by purity culture, but men, you have been victimized too.
Do not seek regular sexual gratification through masturbation.
Before we jump in, I can't believe it. You all have been posting this on your stories. Please keep them coming. I absolutely love to see it. And also don't forget to rate and review on Amazon and Goodreads. Doing so could really change an author's life, could bump up the visibility on Her Knees. So that support would mean so much to me. Okay, so one of the first things that's been on my mind is I don't understand why men are not more motivated to protect men. Rates of male suicide have skyrocketed. The majority, if not all, of these mass shooters are men, and there is an apparent mental health crisis among your brothers. Not only is this a call for you to be an ally to me, to all the women that I know and love, the women that I don't know that I still love, the additional ask is to consider the men in your life, the men you know and love. And these clips I've pulled today are going to highlight and show you how men have been deeply, darkly, and profoundly hurt by purity culture. So I've got these clips ordered all the way from infancy to marriage and exposure to pornography. And these clips span a decade, which will show you these ideas and fallacies have been prominent in Christian culture for a long time. So let's first begin with the lies that you men were taught about your sexuality really early in childhood.
We don't actually understand physically how the male brain is wired. There is actually a center of the male brain that lights up when that guy sees a girl or a woman who's dressing in a way that kind of calls overt attention to a good figure, like the spaghetti strap top.
So even the fact that these mothers are making the observation that their male children will have these sexual desires or urges or interests, this wouldn't be normalized in purity culture. This would be considered sinful. It would be considered lustful. That will be immediately vilified as sin. And you can already see in this narrative that women are putting the onus back on women.
Like the spaghetti strap top. And the female brain doesn't do this.
Also, these Christian teachers are immediately gendering sexual desire. They're saying men have this compulsory thing in their brain. They're wired differently than women, and that therefore women must be careful to not stir that desire up inside of them. Side note, sexual desire, how often you want it, how you want it, is not gendered.
Prove this to you, okay? We lost my son once in the mall when he was 4 years old, and we found him in front of the Victoria's Secret window going, and he said, I like those ladies. And he said, they're bare tummies. make my tummy feel good.
So right here, this mother is talking about her 4-year-old son. And look, this is not a judgment. This is just an observation. This woman is on camera recounting this story, and she's given other people full-on permission to share this story whenever they like.
So do the moms out there listening have your permission to tell that story
Oh,
about
yeah.
your son?
For me, that lets you know that this private moment this child had, which frankly was completely misunderstood by this woman, has now been put on blast for the world to know about, which I can only presume would cause more shame. Additionally, I called up my incredible friend, Dr. Tina Shermer-Sellers, certified sex therapist, author, and certified supervisor of sex therapy. And I just asked her, Tina, is it possible that a 4-year-old boy was being stimulated by sexual feelings at the site of a Victoria's Secret model? Because from my knowledge of sexuality, children do not experience sexual desire at that age.
We have to remember that kids can begin getting shamed around body and sexuality at about a year old, as soon as their hand finds their genitals. And so there were hundreds and hundreds of times between that year-old and that 4-year-old time when this child observed parents being uncomfortable, maybe angry, maybe shushing them, maybe turning off the TV, maybe doing all kinds of things that gave him the message that anything around naked bodies is bad, is dangerous.
Encourage your boys,
Excellent choice.
eyes down
Yeah,
when you
so
see
that
something
it
you
never
shouldn't.
goes into their brain to begin with.
So, no, it doesn't say anything except for it highlights the fact that this child has already been shamed.
So here comes another doozy in men's purity culture: masturbation. And the reason this topic is so heavy and huge is because, again, sexuality is a part of us. The desire to masturbate is normal, and not only normal, but proven healthy, especially for men. Here's what y'all men have been taught.
Do not seek regular sexual gratification through masturbation. It contradicts the God-given design for sexuality. Everyone knows that intimate touching is the prelude to and preparation for sexual intercourse. You stop it, you'll be frustrated to death and wind up in masturbation.
There's a lot in that, but this is why I'm really working to expand our definition of sex. We've been told in our culture that penetrative sex is the ultimate, the supreme, but even that concept leads so quickly to homophobia and ableism. Not everyone has sex in the same way, and there are a myriad of wonderful ways that you and your partner can bring each other pleasure.
What do you do with the PG movies? What do you do with Time magazine? What do you do with the newspaper and television and the drugstore counters and the rock music lyrics?
This anxiety you men have been given that you need to divert your eyes anytime you see something stimulating. Your sexuality is dangerous. The monster of it is lurking around every corner, just ready to attack you.
This is the great test of whether we are free or whether we are enslaved to the slave master of our bodily passions.
So something I've noticed a lot of purity culture teachers telling men is that you all are enslaved. He just used the word enslaved to your desire, to your sin. And he's specifically talking about masturbation.
So anything that we would do to aid us in masturbating that would involve lust, we know is a problem. We shouldn't beat people up when they struggle with all kinds of sin, whether it's a burst of anger or a burst of lust. But we shouldn't surrender to it and just say, well, I'm not shooting people. It's because I'm venting my anger, right? By just calling them a bunch of abusive names. That's just not a good way to live.
I thought it was so interesting that this pastor brought up the idea of, well, I'm not shooting anyone. Because I truly, truly believe that this forced, coerced repression of your innate, inherent sexuality can manifest in some really ugly ways. This obviously is never an excuse for ill behavior. You men are very capable of controlling your anger, controlling your rage, controlling what you do to women.
Heroin and cocaine, okay, which we all know are damaging to us. It's not the act of taking heroin or the act of taking cocaine that make them so addictive. When the human body experiences climax, it releases oxytocins, it releases other chemicals that are that produce in us a sense of calm and relaxation and happiness, serotonins.
Isn't it so interesting that this guy is talking about all of these happy, very healthy chemicals that get released in your body, which, by the way, get released doing other activities as well, like riding a roller coaster or eating a chocolate cake. But he's saying this is a problem and likening it to heroin abuse or addiction. That is truly mind-blowing to me. What he's saying is that your body is releasing all of these chemicals and it will draw you back to that behavior, that you will become enslaved or addicted to the behavior of masturbation.
And then it's often followed by this shame and this guilt and maybe even this self-disgust.
Hear that? You will experience shame.
It definitely affects our connection with the Lord because we don't feel worthy of his love.
I keep saying this as well. There is a difference between shame and conviction. Shame is external, conviction is internal. But I encourage you men to excavate those emotions and really look at them.
And it is a fact that if you train your body, Rick, to find pleasure over a period of time by self-stimulation, that's not an easy thing to flip and switch. It's why so many people inside marriage would even say, I'd rather, believe it or not, masturbate than have physical intimacy with my spouse because I've trained my body. That's how it's going to be pleasured.
This is called pseudoscience, and it upsets me how they lie to you. This is based in nothing remotely factual, no educated research on sexuality. This is simply a lie we've been told in purity culture to, again, build our sexuality on a foundation of fear. Satan is the author of fear, not Jesus.
And if you short circuit that drive, that motivation to push yourself into relationship by masturbating, well, you just took a whole bunch of momentum, a whole bunch of motivation out of connecting to somebody.
If this is a fallacy you've been told and believe, I encourage you to go out into the world, talk to secular male friends from different cultural backgrounds, and ask them if this is true. I guarantee you, I promise you, masturbation does not in itself diminish your desire to be in communal lovemaking.
So your sexual drive, that tension that you feel, that anxiety that you feel when you want to masturbate was meant to push you into relationship.
I think the most telling part of this clip, besides the fact that it is based completely on falsehoods and fear, is when this gentleman talks about the anxiety, was the word that he used to describe when he is feeling the desire to masturbate. That is not healthy, God-ordained sexuality. So now you see the lies that men are telling each other about masturbation. Complete, outright, disprovable theories. And now let me show you what men have been threatened with if they should decide to engage in masturbation.
And what you're doing is that you're giving away for free the promise that God has for you. You are compromised. You are in a place that you don't even realize that you are handing over destiny, that you are willingly giving up your children, that you are standing and handing over the freedom that Christ gives you.
Okay, Mike Todd. He's saying don't engage in masturbation or pornography because you will give up your children. Sometimes I think Mike Todd goes on too dang long and he is not holding himself accountable to each line. And you can accuse me of cutting up clips and taking out the worst parts, but that is how the brain works. You can catch one line in one message and then internalize that and make that a belief about yourself. Mike Todd, stop telling people they will lose their destiny because of their sexuality when that didn't happen in your life. Yes, sorry, I'm mad at Mike Todd. Mike Todd, hit me up. I would love to have a loving conversation with you because I really do know you can do better and I want the best for you, really. Come talk to a purity culture survivor. And this messaging bleeds out to men everywhere in all different circles all over the world. This, for example, is a roundtable between Lisa Bevere and her adult sons.
I started realizing what pornography and those things actually do to marriage and how it compromises every facet of marriage and every facet of love and everything like that. And I was like, I am ruining what I have dreamed about already, and I'm not even married yet.
Again, hear that fear, hear what it does. It is saying you will lose your life, your destiny, your blessing, all the goodness in your life, your shot at a good marriage before you've even met the person that you're going to marry. Now, notice the violent, aggressive terminology that is used to supposedly help men resist the temptation of masturbation and pornography.
And it started a war in my mind. And that's why today's title is this: Your Porn Battle Plan. And the good news is that you have the heart of a warrior with a kingdom to advance and someone to protect and a battle to win.
So I genuinely find this disturbing that men have been told in countless purity culture messages that they are to battle, wage war, kill the desires inside of them. This is aggressive, militant, violent oppression of your sexuality. In the Atlanta shooting, we also heard messaging from the shooter himself that he was trying to get rid of external factors.
Enemy can't come in unless you let him. And many of us have given the enemy permission.
There is a huge messaging in the evangelical and conservative church that men's sexuality is external to them, that there are forces outside of your own selves that are causing you to behave in these compulsive, violent, and repressive ways.
This is how you start off, by watching men and women have sex, and it's never enough, so the bar goes up, and now that doesn't satisfy me. Now I'm watching men and women, and now I'm watching bestiality, men having sex with animals, and now I'm watching people have sex with poop, and I'm watching people have sex with trees, and I'm watching people beat people in slavery, and now I'm watching pedophilia.
Holy moly.
Because when you get into perversion, you'll steal, you'll lie, you'll manipulate, you'll change.
I will do a video in the near future about pornography myself because it is very nuanced and I have very complicated feelings about it. But this is not it. Your masturbation does not lead to lying, cheating, stealing, and immediately into depraved behavior, aka watching people in non-consensual sexual situations and finding that erotic. Again, fear. These are fear-based lies about male sexuality.
Pornography gradually lets you kill you. All it takes is a bound person meeting a right opportunity to meet their demise. Because when you open the door to perversion, everything is fair game.
And of course, like we saw in the Atlanta shooting, when your sexuality is overtaking you, when you've given permission, when you've let the enemy in, who will be to blame?
Hey, it's not his fault. You know whose fault it is? Eve. You get mad at Eve.
In defense of this pastor, this gentleman was not saying that in the context of sexual assault or women being harmed. He was talking about childbirth and how if you are in pain in childbirth, you have to look at Eve and blame her. But I pull this clip because it is a common piece of theology that I see.
Get mad at Eve.
Eve is blamed for the fall of the world, for the demise of everything. And Adam is treated as if he zombie walked in there because Eve was so dang seductive, was so succumbed to evil that she drew him into it. And if you propagate this theology, gentlemen, I need you to understand you are not being an ally to women.
And these women that you see on the screen, they're evil, beyond wicked, for they cause so much damage and wreckage in your life by causing you to fall, stumble, and stay in sexual sin.
To honor my bride, Amy, and to honor my God and my pastoral calling, I'm not gonna be alone with women in any context. We're not talking in my office, you're not getting in my car and we're driving to a restaurant so we can sit across from each other and have intimate talk. I know in the business world that's kind of common and whatever, like maybe the business world needs to grow some brains and recognize there's just no reason for that, okay? Sorry if that offends you.
It's interesting that this portion of the sermon is framed as something respectful he's doing for his wife, but in reality, it is so disrespectful and dismissive to women. And to the contrary, the church needs to take a cue from those brainless people this pastor is talking about, because this man is straight up sexualizing the entire female population, saying, I can't be in a room with you, I can't be in a car with you, I can't talk to you with the respect that I would a coworker together, knowing that we're in a professional setting. And what does that do to women? Make the world less safe for us. But this nonsense starts real young.
A woman walking by in a skimpy outfit is a major, major stumbling block. Just the way our brain works, the way our eyes work, the way the two things work together. It's how we were created.
This video looks like it's over 10 years old. Did this kid grow up to be this pastor?
I'm not going to be alone with women in any context.
If a girl's dressing modest, I can have a conversation with her and not be tempted to look anywhere else. It's just the girl, and I can look into her eyes and have a conversation with her.
This young man has been indoctrinated to believe that if a woman is dressed in a certain way, that he will be incapable of not addressing her as a sex object.
In our family, it kind of went by the guidelines. It can't be too tight, it can't be too low, it can't be too short, and our stomach couldn't show. And that was when we were active. So we couldn't have a tank top that went right to the top of our pants. But if we breathed or, anything, our stomach would show. So that was unacceptable.
Everyone laughed because holy moly, she just had a Freudian slip and said, if you breathe and you can see a bit of my skin, then that is unacceptable, was the word that she used.
When you dress immodestly, you set a level of respect, not only that you have for yourself, but that you're commanding from others. And that when you don't even respect yourself, how do you expect someone, especially of the opposite sex, to respect you?
These young men are infuriating, but remember that they are literally on camera being indoctrinated before your eyes. This kid has been taught that he has the ability to assess whether or not a woman values herself, whether or not she knows her worth.
We appreciate you respecting us by dressing modestly, and it shows your respect for yourself too, and that gives us a lot more desire to respect you if you respect yourself by covering yourself up and showing your worth in that way.
We as Christians say we don't judge. We are commanded not to judge. And yet look at how we've indoctrinated our young people who are now all grown up and living in this world and presumably raising children of their own.
So how do girls who are modest view the immodest girls?
When you see someone dressing like that, you kind of think they don't respect themselves.
If a girl walks by in a skimpy outfit, it's a girl that's kind of crying out in desperation saying, I need something. And she doesn't feel that what's inside is enough to offer.
They're looking for that validation.
Yeah.
But they're probably not getting it at home, or...
It just sends a message that do they care about themselves? Do they care about the guys around? Because I know me, it makes me struggle.
This indoctrination, Christian church, is on you. Men, you don't know anything about a woman according to how she's dressed. And if you want to tell me that you do, stop playing dumb. You've been told you're dumb, that you can't handle yourself, that you don't know how to control your sexuality. I'm here to tell you the opposite. But while men give toxic messages about women, you will find plenty of female teachers willing to dole out that toxicity too.
Okay, well, it says that the adulteress takes a man's power, takes a man's strength.
Who's an adulteress? A sex worker? Have these women taken away men's power?
So what does the pure woman do? She adds to the man's power. She adds to his strength.
And watch this ironic clip from Lisa Bevere. It's wild to me. Here, Lisa Bevere is saying that other places shame their women by forcing them to cover their bodies.
Well, if you've ever gone over to the Taliban and you see how they cover those women in shadow and shame, and they are like paraded as the cause of sin. Cover them up, cover them up. We don't want to look at them. They cause us to sin.
Every conservative church I've ever walked into in my life has done the same thing. The only difference perhaps is that other countries will use the law to make women cover up, while our churches will just use shame.
In nations like Europe, Australia, and America, we don't have that issue. We take off our own clothes. We shame ourselves.
Another thing Lisa Bevere doesn't realize is that as she's indoctrinating women into toxic purity culture, she is simultaneously giving men toxic messages about women who are sexually active. This post is over a year old. She put up an ebook called You're Worth the Wait, where she says there's a danger in giving ourselves away too soon. We forfeit our dignity, honor, and strength. Men are not interested in knowing more thoroughly those they have already known too quickly. What toxic purity culture does is other and discriminate against and disregard anyone who is willing to have sex outside of the context that Christianity, evangelicalism, deems the only appropriate way to have sex.
And these women that you see on the screen, they're evil.
And men, I know it's hurting you too.
How do guys view those girls?
I think for short term, those are the kind of girls I want to be with because they can get more from them, but in the long term, that's not who they want to be with.
The Bible also says they promise freedom. Come live like us, experience true freedom when they themselves are slaves to their own depravity. Guys, stay strong. Don't follow them into lives of godlessness.
This is such a dangerous way of thinking because it leads us to believe we are better. That is a superiority complex that needs to be burned out of our religion. And I know you may still be wrestling, in the words of many men, with the idea of whether or not masturbation is okay. Let me present to you Tara Tang and her interpretation, which is one I 100% agree with, on what the Bible actually means when we talk about sexual immorality.
About fleeing from sexual immorality. I've done research. I've been studying theology from an academic perspective for a decade. And I've looked into this, like, what are we actually saying when we're talking about sexual immorality? We're not saying that sex outside of marriage is sexual immorality. Sexual immorality means anything that violates a person's humanity, that violates their consent, that sees them not as someone that is made in the image of God, but strips them of their imago Dei and turns them into a sex object or something for you to just dominate, control, get profit or pleasure from. Anything that strips them from their humanity, that is sexual immorality.